In this video I will summarise the plot of episode 6 of King and Conqueror, how this relates to history, and then I'll review it. The episode starts with Hardrada plotting to invade England, asking a Saxon why he should be kept alive. Edward is in bed delirious. Harold arrives, granting Edward protection, and tries to dissuade Edward over William's succession. Edward speaks of the devil coming, fire is coming, and England ablaze. Then he passes. Edith, Gunhild, and the Archbishop of Canterbury is there. Harold states Edward renounced William, proclaiming Harold king. The episode has Edward pass before making a promise to Harold. Harold must get the support of the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria before Edward's passing is announced. Morcar will come, but Tostig isn't responding, so Harold sends Edith to find out what's going on. William is training, and Matilda tells him of Edward's illness and proposes to send spies suspecting Harold's plotting. William is now eager to invade England, in contrast to earlier episodes, and starts plotting with his barons to invade England. Matilda wants to be included in all decisions about the invasion, and Williams is not to make a decision without her. Edith confronts Harold, who sticks to the story about Edward's promise. Harold needs Tostig's support. Baldwin is plotting with William to get Breton ships and the Breton Duke on side. Harold meets Morcar, telling him that Edward chose Harold to be king. Morcar wants to see the decree. Harold wants Morcar's support, telling him William will tear the country apart. Morcar agrees and demands Tostig's earldom of Northumbria as his price for his support, as well as his sister Margaret marrying Harold. Harold initially opposes this, as he already has a wife, but only in the Danish fashion, and is not recognised by the church. Harold wants his son Magnus to marry Morcar's daughter. Morcar refuses, stating William is amassing forces, telling Harold to choose, forcing his hand. Gunhild opposes this. Harold dismisses everyone, then says yes to Morcar, avoiding civil war. Edith arrives in the north, meeting a grief-stricken Tostig. He thinks Harold has abandoned him. He had previously sent word asking for Harold's help, referenced Judith, while Harold was in Normandy. Edith tells Tostig about Edward and Harold needing his support to become king. Tostig has friends in Mercia who told him about Sven's passing, and he relays this to Edith. Tostig does not trust Harold, who will betray him and everyone, or so he thinks. He also states that he saw and loved Edith first. Edith leaves some men behind, promising Harold will come and meet Tostig. Harold meets Margaret. William meets the Breton Duke, offering him silver for the ships. The Breton Duke is reluctant and doesn't want to make an enemy of Harold if the invasion fails. He wants Normandy. William refuses and leaves. Edith returns to London, finding out about Sven's perishing in a tavern brawl, or so the story goes. Githa wants to hear about Tostig and is told about Judith and the baby. Harold tells Edith about Morcar becoming Earl of Northumbria and bringing Tostig home. She finds out that Harold has married Margaret and is upset. Harold says there was no choice, to avoid civil war and to get Morcar's support. Edith fears for Magnus's safety with a target on his back because Morcar wants his blood relative on the throne of England. She realises that Harold ordered Sven's demise and Tostig was right. What has the crown done to Harold? A Mercian arrives to meet Tostig, relieving him of his earldom and giving it to Morcar, telling Tostig to go to London. Tostig dispatches the Mercian and he escapes. Matilda knows Edward is on his deathbed, and Harold is forging alliances. William continues to plot building an army. Matilda doesn't want him to invade and to be cautious. She fears for him. Matilda wants to plot the invasion with William, and for William to declare Robert his heir in Normandy, and for her to act as regent should anything happen. Harold is crowned king. Hardrada invades England, and Harold is informed at his coronation and is surprised. The episode shows the result of a raid or battle, before cutting back to this first scene at the beginning of the episode, with Tostig being revealed as the Saxon Hardrada was speaking to. Will the next episode remember Emma's promise in an earlier episode? Probably not. Sven's mention in this episode is irrelevant because he passed in 1052, not on the eve of the conquest. Could Harold have stretched Edward's promise? Yes, but so could William. Yet the show presents more the Norman version of events, with Edward promising William the throne and Harold's trip to Normandy to confirm this, or with Harold plotting his own agenda. From what I can gather, James Norton, who plays Harold, reassured the French president about being fair to William, and this is done by using the Norman point of view. Edward does reportedly say that devils would invade England, which would be put to fire and sword within a year of his passing, in a vision shortly before he himself passes. I should note that the story of Edward's deathbed bequest of "I entrust my kingdom and wife to your care," and Edward's touching Harold's hand on the Bayeux tapestry, made in England at Canterbury under the direction of Bayeux, Earl of Kent, who was William's half-brother. So this does suggest that there was something to the promise that Edward made to Harold. The victors write the history, and the Normans wanted to blacken Harold and his claim, while vigorously promoting William's claim. Harold's claim, therefore, surviving the Norman conquest, is very interesting, and as mentioned, there must be something to that. The same can be said of Hardrada's claim being exaggerated, taking up his nephew Magnus's claim over the deal that Magnus made with Arthur Canute, as to whoever perished first would inherit the other's kingdom. Arthur Canute invaded England not long after this, and Magnus would write a letter to Edward in 1043 promising to invade. The three earls of Mercia during this time was Leofric until 1057. Now interestingly, Leofric's wife was also Godiva. Now their son was Elfgar. He was Earl of Mercia from 1057 to 1062. He was outlawed twice in 1055 and 1058, forcing his return with help from Welsh allies, and then Elfgar's son Edwin becomes Earl in 1062. The show cuts out the Northumbrian revolt in October 1065 against Tostig because his rule was considered too harsh in implementing southern taxes and laws. Tostig did not retaliate against Malcolm, King of the Scots, in his raiding of northern England, and Tostig's involvement in the assassination of certain rivals in Northumbria. John Key mentions 4 in his book The House of Godwin: Gamal, son of Orm, and Ulf, son of Dulkin, Gospatrick, son of Uhtred, and Sigyn, and the last 2 were apparently assassinated in 1064 during the Christmas festivities, with his sister Edith connected to this. Now Edwin, Earl of Mercia, joined the rebellion supporting the rebels. Edward wanted to fight this, and the Witan didn't want to fight, and they sent Harold to negotiate with the rebels, who then agreed to exile Tostig and make Morcar Earl of Northumbria. Now Morcar was Edwin's brother, and by doing this it avoided civil war. It is possible that around this time Harold arranged to marry Edith of Mercia, Edwin and Morcar's sister, in order to gain their support for his ascension. Now, Tostig did feel betrayed by Harold, and indeed accused him in the Witan of being behind the rebellion, and hence his exile. Now, Harold's marriage to Edith the Fair, or Swan Neck, was in the Danish fashion, and it wasn't recognised by the church, and this left him free to marry again. There isn't any record of Morcar having a daughter. Now, Judith, who was Tostig's wife, outlived Tostig by about 29 years, and she passed in 1097, having remarried Welf of Bavaria and having his children. Now, following the Northumbrian revolt, Edward seems to have suffered a series of strokes, rendering him too ill to attend the opening of his great project, Westminster Abbey, in December 1065. Now, all the earls had gathered for this opening. Edward rallies enough to give his warning and promise to Harold before passing on the 5th of January 1066. He is buried the following day on the 6th of January, and Harold is crowned on the same day as Edward's funeral. The show cuts out Tostig's travel, going first to Flanders, his wife's homeland, then to Normandy, meeting William, then, according to one source, Tostig meeting his cousin Sven Estridsson to enlist his help, which failed because Sven had just come out of a long war with Hardrada. Sven had his own designs on the English throne, pressing it in 1069 to 1070. Sven offered Tostig an earldom instead, which Tostig turned down, and they parted badly, not before Sven pointing Tostig Hardrada's way. Tostig then meets Hardrada and convinces him to invade England. In May 1066, Tostig raids the south coast, then into Norfolk and Lincoln. He tries to get his brother Gurth, Earl of East Anglia, to side with him, but this doesn't happen. Tostig is rebuffed by Edwin and Morcar in Lincolnshire. When Tostig raided the south coast in May 1066, Harold called out the Fjord, thinking William was coming, keeping the Fjord active until the 8th of September 1066, far longer than their 60-day term. It is not known how involved Edith was in these events. Now, women's power and influence typically, not always, was exercised behind the scenes through their husbands and their sons, sometimes acting as regent when the ruler was on campaign, like Matilda did for William when he invaded England, or like Eleanor of Aquitaine did for Richard the Lionheart when he was on crusade and imprisoned, or if their son was too young. Now, whether the wives of Harold and William should be inserted into every major scene and decision is open to debate. Harold was indeed surprised about the thunderbolt from the north invading England, but it wasn't on the day of Harold's coronation, but in September 1066, because large-scale campaigns take time to organise. Now, Hardrada launched his invasion in September 1066, first resupplying in Orkney, joining Tostig in Scotland. He then raised the coast of northern England before sailing up the Humber and into the River Ouse, landing near York. They fought and won the Battle of Fulford against Edwin and Morcar on the 20th of September 1066. Then both Hardrada and Tostig lose at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September 1066, where they both would perish. As soon as William found out of Edward's passing and Harold's ascension to the throne, he was actually hunting in Normandy, and he then immediately started preparing to invade. He gathered Bretons, Flemings, and other French, as well as Normans, building or commandeering a fleet of about 700 ships. There were some Normans who opposed the invasion of England, fearing crossing the Channel with their feudal duty not extending beyond the sea. They feared England's military strength, and the army and navy could not be raised in Normandy alone, hence the other French troops that were raised. And the nobility did not have the financial resources for this endeavour. Now, William Fitz-Osbern, William's right-hand man, tricked them into providing double their feudal requirements, and also the promises of riches upon invading England. The nobles also feared William's temper. Now, Matilda actually gifted William a large ship for the invasion of England. Now, Robert was declared William's heir in Normandy, and Matilda acted as regent during William's absence. Tostig's arc in this episode is nonsensical in its delivery and lazy in what it left out. The show puts in the nonsense of Tostig feeling betrayed about Harold, who was in Normandy, not responding to his Tostig asking for help, and then suddenly not trusting Harold for this very reason, and about Harold's involvement in Sven's demise. There is little build-up to this in previous episodes, except for the mentioning of Tostig asking for Harold's help in the previous episode, while cutting out what actually happened regarding the Northumbrian revolt against his rule, and Harold siding with the rebels, causing Tostig's exile. This would have been far better to have actually included in the series, but alas, it wasn't. The show is simply awful. The drama is non-existent, and it has a jumbled up and incoherent plot. It has jumbled up and condensed history, adding to the incoherent plot, cutting out important points and historical figures that impact events to come. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.